The Twitter Files Part 2, 3, 4, and 5 have been released. They show Twitter secretly blacklisted influential users, worked with government agencies, and made up justifications to ban Trump. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by MOVA globes. These are really amazing globes that spin on their own without cords or batteries. And whether you get this green and white antique model or one of their other great world map designs, you can appreciate the beauty of our planet. So, a lot more behind-the-scenes evidence of Twitter censorship came out since Twitter CEO Elon Musk released Part 1 of the Twitter Files. If you want to learn more about that, check out the link below. At this point, the Twitter Files has more sequels and hard to keep track of characters than the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And people are more opinionated about it than Martin Scorsese is about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Former New York Times and Wall Street Journal writer Barry Weiss published Part 2, showing that Twitter was shadow banning people through blacklists. Basically, Twitter was making it harder for users to see posts from controversial accounts without outright kicking these people off Twitter. I've long suspected this. How else do you explain how this thirst trap of mine got only 2 likes? This is obviously suppression. Twitter has in the past denied that it was shadow banning, like in this blog post from 2018, and in this Debunking Twitter Myths article in their Help Center. Debunking is one of those words that's become almost meaningless now. Many news outlets took Twitter at its word because believing something you saw on Twitter is always a smart move. Back in 2018, New York Magazine dismissed shadow bans as a conspiracy theory. So did the Washington Post. Conspiracy theory is another word that is almost meaningless now. But despite all the shadow banning denials, according to the Twitter Files, teams of Twitter employees prevent disfavored tweets from trending and actively limit the visibility of entire accounts or even trending topics, all in secret without informing users. If you're wondering why this is a big deal, imagine if you performed at a talent show and right before you got on stage, someone blindfolded and put noise-canceling headphones on every audience member. All those accordion lessons for nothing. A lot of these blacklists targeted people with conservative views. Here you can see tags such as Search Blacklist, Not Safe for Work View, and Do Not Amplify apply to popular right-wing talk show hosts Dan Bongino and activist Charlie Kirk. But this wasn't just limited to right-wing users. Twitter put a professor of medicine from Stanford University in a trends blacklist after he argued that COVID lockdowns would harm children. That would keep his tweets from ever trending. This aged more poorly than cottage cheese on an Arizona sidewalk in July. How does Twitter explain their blacklists? Simple. They didn't call it shadow banning. Twitter executives and employees called it visibility filtering, or VF. It's the exact same thing, but they just called it something different. It's kind of like when Shakespeare said a rose by any other name definitely isn't a rose. Except Twitter would argue that visibility filtering is totally different from shadow banning. Because this is the definition of shadow banning they used, according to Vijaya Gad, then head of legal policy and trust at Twitter. Deliberately making someone's content undiscoverable to everyone except the person who posted it, unbeknownst to the original poster. According to Gad, by this specific definition, Twitter doesn't shadow ban, because you could still see the tweets of people you follow. Sure, you might have to go to their profile because Twitter won't show them to you in your timeline, but that's not shadow banning, according to Twitter. By that same token, Twitter could claim they didn't shadow ban according to political viewpoints or ideology because they didn't shadow ban at all. So what is visibility filtering? Visibility filtering blocks searches of individual users, limits the scope of a tweet's discoverability, blocks posts from even appearing on the trending page, and blocks posts from hashtag searches without users' knowledge. So basically, visibility filtering is what most people mean when they talk about shadow banning. It's stuff that limits the reach of specific tweets or users. But because you could technically still see those tweets if you tried really hard, Twitter claims that isn't shadow banning. It's like a school bully claiming he never gave you a sorely, he just dunked your head in the toilet. It's not a sorely because he didn't flush. There, don't you feel better? The group in charge of limiting the reach of certain users was called the Strategic Response Team, Global Escalation Team. If you don't want people to think you're doing covert operations, maybe don't name yourself like a Navy SEAL unit. But there existed a level beyond rank-and-file moderators. It's called the Site Integrity Policy Escalation Support. It's a secret group that includes GAD, then Global Head of Trust and Safety Yoel Roth, CEOs Jack Dorsey and Parag Agrawal, and others to deal with the most politically sensitive decisions. One of the accounts that rose to this level of scrutiny was Libs of TikTok, a right-leaning account that reposts controversial LGBTQ videos with commentary. But justification for that is more questionable than that one time Elon Musk got this haircut. In an internal memo from October 2022, after Libs of TikTok's 7th suspension, the committee acknowledged that Libs of TikTok had not violated Twitter's hateful conduct policy. So Libs of TikTok didn't break any rules, they just did something Twitter didn't like. This would be like a cop arresting someone for saying, "I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you." It's annoying, but it's not illegal. Twitter has been inconsistent with its own policies and justifications for decisions after the fact. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. Independent journalist Matt Taibbi, who wrote the Twitter Files Part 1, also wrote Part 3, showing how Twitter regularly engaged with U.S. law enforcement agencies and censored Trump before the January 6th riots. There's a lot to unpack there, but I just want to say it's nice to see a saga that wasn't completely derailed when a different writer jumped in between Parts 1 and 3. You know, maybe they should hire the authors of the Twitter Files to do the next Star Wars trilogy. It's well known that Twitter has been pressured by the government to restrict speech. But according to the Twitter Files, senior executives like Trust and Security Chief Yoel Roth met weekly with the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, and Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Nothing shady about that at all. Maybe they were just trying to convince them to finally add an edit button. Why won't you listen to the will of the people, Twitter? And law enforcement agencies aren't just meeting with Twitter. They're going through Twitter and reporting tweets that they want to censor. Here you can see the FBI reporting 2 tweets about mail-in ballots. Twitter then decided to apply a "Learn how voting is safe and secure" label, though sometimes that can be more complicated when there are cases like voters receiving the wrong ballots. Honestly, the most important label Twitter could have is a "Are you sure this is worth it?" pop-up every time you tweet. But things got really murky when Twitter micromanaged what should and shouldn't be censored. Executives started judging things such as intent, whether the tweet is shown to condemn or support an idea, and whether the tweet caused confusion. Which is ridiculous, because every tweet causes confusion. Mainly because whenever I see one, I think, why the heck does anyone still use Twitter at this point? For example, when faced with pro-Biden tweets warning Trump may try to steal the election, executives approved them, saying the tweets just expresses concern that mailed ballots might not make it on time. Even the hashtag #StealOurVotes, referencing a theory that Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Trump would steal the election, was approved by Twitter because it was understandable and a reference to a U.S. Supreme Court decision. So Democrat fears of elections being stolen? Good. Republican fears of elections being stolen? Bad. Totally unbiased. The staff of Twitter is bluer than a frozen Smurf trying out for the Blue Man Group painted by Picasso between 1901 and 1904. Yep, those are the references I chose. Deal with it. Internal Twitter chats suggest moderators and executives judge tweets based on guesses, gut instincts, and Google searches. The least reliable 3Gs since the one I used on my flip phone. I'll tell you more after the break. Welcome back. Twitter has been censoring, visibility filtering, Trump, even without particular policy violations before the January 6th riot. Things got only worse after the January 6th riot. Part 4 of the Twitter files, released by author Michael Schellenberger, show how Twitter executives justified banning Trump after that event. During that time, Roth and other Twitter executives pushed for a system that penalized controversial speech with penalties leading up to permanent suspension. The problem was that Trump didn't have nearly enough strikes to get banned. That's right, Donald Trump wasn't controversial enough. That's like finding out that a frozen Smurf trying out for the Blue Man Group, painted by Picasso between 1901 and 1904, isn't blue enough. So Twitter winged it. Twitter argued that Trump's remarks on January 6th risked further inciting violence, specifically how they were being received and interpreted. This was despite the fact that Twitter said it didn't attempt to determine all potential interpretations of the content or its intent, and that there was a clear interest to keeping tweets from world leaders on the service. Of course there's a clear interest. Without world leaders on Twitter, we would have never gotten Kofifi. Again, this is why we need an edit button. When asked what policy Trump would need to violate to get suspended, Roth said any policy violation. They even went so far as to censor people who tweeted screenshots of Trump's posts, even those who weren't fans of Trump. But Twitter knew that Trump wasn't inciting violence. Part 5 of the Twitter files, released by Barry Weiss, proves this. Twitter staff assigned to evaluate Trump's tweets after January 6 quickly concluded that Trump had not violated Twitter's policies. They say that it's pretty clear he's saying the American patriots are the ones who voted for him and not the rioters. Even Anika Navaroli, a Twitter policy official who would later testify in the January 6 committee, didn't see any clear or coded incitement in Trump's tweet and found no violations. The same happened with a second Trump tweet about not attending the inauguration. It was not a violation. Meanwhile, pressure was building internally from Twitter employees to ban Trump. Twitter employees later found justification saying Trump's tweet may have violated Twitter's glorification of violence policy if you interpreted the phrase American patriots to refer to the rioters. This was pushed by employees who viewed Trump as the leader of a terrorist group responsible for January 6 violence and compared him to the Christchurch shooter and Hitler. So glad to see Twitter cares so much about banning world leaders from inciting violence. Like when the supreme leader of Iran called Israel a malignant tumor that needed to be eradicated. Oh, sorry, that tweet is still up. Did I say leaders? I meant only Trump. Because somehow he was more dangerous than those who've explicitly called for killing people. When Trump was finally banned, Twitter employees celebrated, except for maybe the employee from China who was one of the only dissenters to a Trump ban because he said, "I deeply understand how censorship can destroy the public conversation." Although others at Twitter probably saw that as a feature and not a bug. After all, destroying the public conversation is basically Twitter's motto. And this episode has been sponsored by Mova Globes. Mova Globes are great. I love the technology. It spins automatically, powered by ambient sunlight. When you pick it up, it keeps spinning, and when you put it back on its base, it corrects its motion. Mova has dozens of other cool designs too, and they're made in Taiwan. Right now, Mova Globes has a special offer for our viewers. I put the details in the description below. Apply our special code, America Uncovered, at checkout to get the extra savings. And when you buy a Mova Globe, you'll also be supporting your favorite show about America. So click below to check out Mova Globes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.